Hello, and welcome back to our farmhouse here on our little country farm. It seems that winter has finally settled in very late this year, and that means lots of cozy food and indoor projects for us. I started out early this morning getting up and going to feed our bottle baby goat. We are still bottle feeding him, but hopefully soon he will be weaned. And we will be dropping those morning feeds, and I am ready for that. But as soon as I came back from the barn, I wanted to get some yogurt going. This was milk pickup day, and I still had an entire jar that we had not gotten through this week. It seems that some weeks Jack can't get enough, or I'm baking a lot, or whatever it is, and then some weeks we barely use any, but we're on a schedule to go pick up milk every Monday. And so the dairy where we get our milk also had been making and posting their yogurt for sale. So I was really craving yogurt. I don't do it all the time, but it is one of Alice's favorite things is yogurt, and I will flavor it with jelly or something, and she really loves that. So with extra milk that needed used up and a jar that needed emptied, I decided to make some yogurt. So I just put that on the saute function in my Instant Pot and let it heat up to 180 while I made Keith some eggs. While I was making the eggs, the yogurt hit 180 degrees, so I pulled the entire pot out of the Instant Pot and let it sit to cool back down to, I watched for it to be 110 to 115 degrees. And I went ahead and cleaned my cast iron while I did this. I have been simmering some water in it right after if I have anything that sticks that needs a more thorough cleaning, and letting it kind of release out of the pan with some hot water. And that seems to do the trick more than scrubbing, because scrubbing I am finding is taking off my seasoning, and we don't want that. So my eggs don't always stick, but for some reason on this day there were some little edges that stuck in a little spot on the bottom. I don't know if my pan wasn't hot enough or what. But then once the milk was back down to 115, 110 degrees, I added in a 1/4 cup of yogurt. I do about a 1/4 cup to every half gallon. I whisk that in, and then I put it back in the Instant Pot on the yogurt function for the rest of the day, and then kind of wiped out the cast iron and put it back on the stove to heat up and dry all the little areas of water out before I added some lard, and then let that cook on there a little bit longer. It was a very cold day on this day, and Keith was off of work but down at the farmhouse building, and so him and my dad were out in cold temperatures, and it was windy and all of the wintertime things, and so I wanted to make something really hot for supper. So we're gonna start with some ham, potato, and collard green soup. Now I call it soup because Iladon and I love a lot of broth. We like to just drink it. It's so good, and it's really good for you also, but really we just love it, especially the broth made from collard greens. So I make it really soupy for that reason, but when I serve it to the boys, they don't like that as much. So I will just get it more chunky for them. I just will strain off some of the broth for them so they don't have as much, and it makes everybody happy. So I am just pulling all the leaves off the collard greens. I don't do this very gracefully at all. I've seen people where they just kind of skin it down the center stalk of it and all the leaves just come off, and it never goes like that for me. So here is my messy pulling the leaves off. But I rinse it out. I'm throwing that in. I do about a bundle to 2-ish quarts of water, and I just started that first to get those cooking down so I could fit everything else, because my crock pot was a little small for this and I underestimated how big of a slow cooker that I needed. Plus the Instant Pot is the only other one I have, and it was too small. The only other one besides my roaster, but that is way too big for this. So I am just adding the greens, adding my water, and then I'll come back later and add the ham and the potatoes. I almost never serve soup alone in our house because, like I said, the boys don't love soup. So I always make something with it because I will never serve just soup since it's not a favorite in our house. And this is how I can get away with even getting to have soup, is adding something. So on this night in particular, we had it with baked beans and I made some cornbread. Now I did a cup of cornmeal and a cup of flour, and I did both fresh milled. I mill my cornmeal from popcorn, and I did the soft white wheat berries. Now this was not as fluffy as my normal cornbread, but I also didn't have any milk left because I used it in the yogurt like a goofball. I just did not have everything planned out right, but I did have just a little bit of cream left in the fridge that really needed used up. I don't buy cream like this hardly ever anymore because we get so much on our milk, but I had it for some reason. I think I had it for a church thing or something. And so I added that and I mixed in some water, and then I added a little bit of yogurt to give it that twang of buttermilk, even though it is not the same. It is what I had. And then I added in my salt and baking powder, and I do sugar in ours if we're eating it plain, but we also like it without. So you could leave that out. And my eggs, and then I poured that all into a hot cast iron pan that had a stick of butter in it. After the greens cooked down quite a bit, I had room to add in the ham and the potatoes. So I'm doing about half of a Frick's ham. Added in my potatoes. I did a potato for everybody plus one. While I made up some rolls that I pulled out of the freezer for sandwiches for lunch, Aladon and I have been reading through the Little House on the Prairie series. We're still in the first book. We read about a chapter a day, and so that's what we were doing.
There were only trees and the wild animals who had their homes among them. Can you imagine living somewhere where there was no other people? We live really far out, don't we? But there's still other people, so where they lived, there was no other people. Wolves lived in the big woods, and bears and huge wildcats. Muskrats, mink, and otter lived by the streets. You do? Kind of, yeah. They looked like shaggy dogs. They pointed their noses at the big bright moon and howled. Do you want to hear those wolves all the time? We kind of do, don't we? We do have coyotes. All the king's horses. And all the king's men. All the king's horses.
Jack and I later this evening went down to the farmhouse to see the progress and to check out a bathtub we got from a little church family friend. And I'm so excited. It will go in our downstairs bathroom / laundry room. And I think it is just the perfect size. It's smaller and we don't need anything massive, so I'm very excited. Then I had some jam to make. I was baking a lot and making some goodies for a thank you little farm goodie box. And so that basically meant baked goods and jam and some flavored cream cheeses. So I'm making freezer jam. I have made this on here before with strawberries. I did the exact same thing except with frozen blueberries, and I didn't let them thaw enough, so I kind of had to adjust. I didn't have time to let them thaw, and I hadn't thought about it in advance. So I'm adding the 2 cups of berries and the 4 cups of sugar into my little pot here and trying to mash them up to release some of the juice, because if you don't, and it looks like what you're going to see here in a minute, it will be way too gritty. It's not going to turn into like a jelly. It'll be thick, but it won't be gooey the way that you want. So don't let it look like this. So I ended up adding some unsweetened cherry juice that I had in the pantry, and it turned out perfect. So you want it all to be a little juicy before you put in your pectin and your water. So I had the 2 cups of berries, 4 cups of sugar over here. Then in the pot beside it on the stove, I boiled 3/4 cup of water and 1 packet of pectin, and then just pour that over the top of the berries and put it in my jars, and into the fridge it went. This yogurt ended up going for about 9 or 10 hours, which was way too much. I never let it go that long. The day just kind of got away from me. And so here, I knew it was too much by the way that it looked. It's not bad. It just is not, it's too sour for me. I don't want it to be too sour. It almost gets bitter. And so you really have to flavor it good to make it edible. But I poured it out into a tea towel with a strainer, and I tied it up to strain for about an hour, which was the perfect yogurt consistency. But then I put it in the fridge overnight to continue straining because I wanted to make some cream cheese. I've done this before, and I flavor it with jelly or brown sugar cinnamon, and it is very, very good. It is a little bit of a different flavor of cream cheese. It doesn't have as much of a cheesy flavor, which sounds funny. I mean, it is cream cheese, but it sounds funny to say it has a cheesy flavor, but when you compare the two side by side, you would know what I'm talking about. But I just strained it off. It was the perfect texture for cream cheese. I added a little bit of cream and whey back in to part of it just because I realized I didn't have enough yogurt, as much yogurt as I wanted that I took from the night before. So I added a little bit back in to get us just a bit more yogurt and then kept the rest as cream cheese. And then for each cup of cream cheese, I added a couple of tablespoons of that blueberry cherry freezer jam to make a berry flavored cream cheese. And then I also did one that was brown sugar and cinnamon, and it had, oh goodness, I think it had 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon and 1/4 cup of brown sugar. Put it in the description below because I can't quite remember off the top of my head all the ratios, but it was very, very good. Now, if you try this, I would only let the yogurt go maybe 6 hours or 8 hours to not get as bitter and sour of a taste, and it'll be closer to cream cheese. You also have to salt it pretty heavily, and that kind of helps out with that cream cheese flavor versus just a yogurt flavor. Now, I made up a big old batch of dough. I made up enough for 4 loaves of bread, and I took half of that and made croissants. And then the other half of that, I made 2 loaves of bread. So it is the same recipe as I always share. And then for the butter block, you just take softened butter and kind of smear it or roll it in parchment and then put it back in the fridge while the dough rises. And then you roll that into it a couple of times and shape your croissants, and they turn out wonderful. So I did that. I did some bagel dough, and then I did bread dough. And so I had all of this going on one day, and it turned out fine, but it was a very busy day. Bagels are kind of a new addition in my kitchen. I've made them a handful of times. My family loves them, and I'm still kind of figuring them out. I did not do fresh milled on any of this since it was for someone else, and I don't know if they like that. But I also don't know how fresh milled bagels would go, so I will try that eventually. But for now, I'm sticking with just the white flour. I let it rise. It's a very, very, very thick dough, like to the point that you're like, there is no way I'm going to be able to shape this. But you can, it just takes some work. And so I take my ball of dough, I set it out exactly like that and flatten it where it's just like a round disc, and then turn it into 8 triangles by just cutting across and then across the other way and then splitting that in half and that in half. So you have all these little triangles, and then I take each point, tuck it under, and roll it on the counter to get the bagel shape. And you will see they're not perfect. There are some weird gaps and stuff, and that is because the bagel dough is so stiff, but they still turn out very delicious and even pretty. Now, while those do their second rise after I shaped them, I am getting on about 2 quarts of water to boil, and 2 tablespoons of baking soda and 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, and that will make your water kind of fizz up, so be careful. But then I drop the bagels in about 2 or 3 at a time. You don't want to crowd them. 2 to 3, maybe 4 at a time, and boil them on each side for 1 minute. And then I immediately pull them out, and I just did plain this day, so I didn't add any toppings. And I put them in the oven to bake for about 20-25 minutes. They will turn a really nice golden brown. Every time I make croissants, they get prettier and prettier. And I don't do it all the time, but I know this winter, as we get into these really cold months, I'm going to be making these chocolate chip ones more. I just added chocolate chips to the dough and kneaded it in. And I figured out that if you roll out your dough to about a 9x13, then you can cut 4 sections and then cut those in half diagonally to get your triangles. And then cut a about 1/2 inch to 1 inch slip on the shortest side, and then angle those sides out to get that classic croissant shape. And then I just let these rise, and then I do an egg wash to give them that crispy texture on the outside and bake them. They also only take about 20 to 25 minutes.